Hello everyone and welcome back to another game played by Mr. Ding Liren. This time against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave from round 2 of the 2018 Shenzhen Masters. Ding has already equaled Tal's record in the previous round, so let's see if he can continue this historic run. Ding has the white pieces in this game and he opens with the English opening. And MVL responds with c5. G3 from Ding, preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop. And here it's kind of funny because both players mimic each other for the next few moves. So here both players fianchetto their bishops, knight c3, knight c6 and rook b1 from Ding, with ideas of going a3 and also b4. Also with this rook on b1, it is now no longer on this dangerous long diagonal. So here knight f6 from MVL and the position is no longer symmetrical. So a6, a3 from Ding carrying out his plan of going b4. And e6 from MVL, preparing to strike maybe with d5. So here d5 from MVL and Ding takes on c5. So MVL castles and we have knight to f3. So here taking with d takes c4 is playable, but this does open up this light square bishop of whites, putting a lot of pressure on b7. So here instead of knight to f3, well, Ding could also, instead of playing knight to f3, he could also take on d5. But maybe he didn't want to go for this as it does free up black's light square bishop. Here black does have an isolated pawn, but it's difficult for white to attack it without an open line. So knight f3 from Ding, and MVL responds with knight to e4. So putting pressure here, therefore Ding defends it, bishop b2. So that is taken. And now queen to a5. So at the moment, white has tripled pawns, so queen to a5, a very sensible move, looking at both c5 and c3. So Ding plays c takes d4, and here queen takes c3 seems very tempting, but after queen d2, white should be better. So black has to take the queen, otherwise white just captures the knight on c6, so after queen takes d2, here white is up a healthy pawn with better developed pieces. So queen takes c3 would be a mistake here. So after Ding's move, c takes d5, MVL goes e takes d5. So white castles, MVL captures on c5, and a4 from Ding, eliminating any queen takes c3 ideas. And also queen takes c3 here can always be met with queen takes d5. So this move a4 also has ideas of rook to b5 in the air. And white is maybe a tiny bit better here because of this very nice bishop on g2 and also white's pressure on b7. MVL goes rook to d8, just giving more protection to d5. Queen d2 from Ding, defending c3, also preparing maybe to double on the d file. So here one idea for black is to go b6, just to eliminate any rook takes b7 from white. And also, oops, sorry about that, preparing to bring this bishop over to e6 to defend the d5 pawn. But here white has rook to b5, which gives him a slightly better position. After queen to e7, then white can simply take here on d5. So he's going to be up a pawn. After bishop b7, maybe just e3 to keep that extra pawn. And this knight doesn't have any good discoveries. So I don't know if this is enough for white to win, but this is very pleasant for white. So here, if instead of playing queen to e7, let's say black goes queen d6, just trying to hold on to d5. Then here white simply piles up with rook to d1. If bishop to e6, then e4, just striking here. Obviously, if that is taken, then queen takes d6. So here, if white plays c4, well, this isn't a bad move, but it's not as good as e4 because black can go d4. And black also has some pressure of his own on c4. So here e4 is the critical move here. And I'm not exactly sure, well, it's going to be very uncomfortable for black to defend this. If he plays something like a6, trying to kick this rook away, then simply rook takes b6. The pawn is now undefended. So here if queen to c7 or queen to c5, trying to get out of this, this pin, and with tempo on the rook, let's say queen to c7. So if the rook retreats, then white can simply take, black can simply take on d4. But here, white can try rook takes c6. After queen recaptures, knight to d4, then take on e6. So here if pawn takes, and after e takes d5, if black recaptures, this is looking quite bad for black's king. So here after queen takes, e takes d5, white has two protected passed pawns, and I don't know about you, but I would much rather be white in this position. So after queen to d2 from Ding, MVL decides to play d4, which does lose a pawn at the end of the variation. So the pieces are traded off and we reach an endgame. So here white has bishop takes b7. But this MVL goes into this recognizing that he has pretty solid drawing chances. So rook takes a4 seems that black has regained the pawn, but here rook to c1, threatening to just double on the 7th rank. So MVL goes defensive for a while. He plays rook to a6, preparing rook coming over to f6 to defend his pawn, and hopefully he will be able to push this a pawn, but looks unlikely. So rook c to c7, rook f6 defending f7. So here white hacks off the pawn. So white is up a pawn, but here with all the pawns on one side of the board, it should be a theoretical draw for MVL. h5 from MVL. But it's quite difficult now for white to make any progress because soon most of the pawns are going to be traded off the board, and the black rook can always cut off the white king from advancing further up the board. And if necessary, the black rook can also give checks along the sides and also at the back of white's king. So here king to f4, just unpinning the e3 pawn, preparing maybe to advance, rook b2, looking at f2 and f3. Ding tries to play on, hoping for some chances, but MVL is a super grandmaster and he can easily hold this theoretically drawn position. Rook b6. So here, rook d5, Ding tries to make some progress, tries to push his pawns. So more pawns are exchanged off the board, and rook to a1, so preparing maybe to give checks at the back. So now we have 2-to-1 pawns in favor of white, but this is still drawn. King to g6, rook to a4, just pinning this pawn, and MVL maintains this pin so that white cannot go e5. So Ding tries king to e3, but MVL simply harasses the king along the sides of the board. Rook to d3, so obviously black shouldn't take, otherwise white would simply win this king and pawn ending. So MVL goes rook to b1, bf f4, rook to e1 check, king d4, rook to f1, going after the f pawn. f5 check from Ding. MVL drops the king back. Rook to a3, trying to give some checks along the side. But now MVL unleashes a series of checks of his own. Rook to d1, king to e3, rook e1 check, king to f3. So if king to f2, then here rook takes e4, and this is going to be drawn. king f3, so MVL continues giving checks. And here rook to b1. Rook a7 check, king f8. So as long as black keeps his king in front of these white pawns and keeps his rook active, then he should hold this quite easily. Ding tries king to d3, trying to bring his king up the board. But again, MVL just gives checks. King c4, and now this king is cut off by this rook. Rook d2, just maintaining the control of the d file to cut off this king. King c5, but well, white can't really achieve much here. King to e8, rook to a7, and here both players agreed to a draw. Nice technique from MVL to hold that endgame. So this result now puts Ding on 96 unbeaten games, which is a new record, beating Tal's record of 95. So the other games in this round were drawn, so that means no sole leaders at the moment. But we shall see what happens in the following rounds. That is all for this video. If you enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Until then, see you in the next video.